Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Neo-Psychodynamic presentation by Linda Storm. And this is for the DCP8443 Theories and Models of Counseling and Psychotherapy. And this is primarily made for Dr. Alicia Davis and my peers. Welcome. The Neo-Psychodynamic is a recursive approach to depth and repair. That is going to be the theme that I'm going to be introducing here. I introduce the neo-psychodynamic stance I use throughout this client session. This framework recognizes recursive emotional processes and integrates with symbolic repair work. For example, I have chosen a client, gotten permission from the client to share a very recent snippet where the client spontaneously brings forward a memory where she felt emotionally unsupported by her father. This experience was not described with clinical terms. It was lived and revisited with raw honesty. She says, and I quote, "You will by the way, you will hear the snippet. I have it on transitioning from slide 8 to slide 9. You will hear this entire narrative that I'm talking about, this portion. But she says, it was just being humans, referring to both their limitations at that particular time. That captures the spirit of recursive meaning making and therapeutic repair. In EMDR terms, if you are EMDR trained or EMDR certified, it's that point where they turn from reflective and that negative cognition and they start to reprocess and they switch or they start to move towards the positive cognitive by transitioning through that phase of realization that we call transition or adaptiveness. In psychodynamic therapy, we call this the meaning making. So welcome and grounding is very important because this is to establish the ground for the therapy at the beginning and in a session. This session that we will be listening to, the narrative from the client, was the third session. And it was to establish therapy as an experience relational emergence. As the session unfolded, the client stated, I don't think it was really affected as much as me feeling like I was scared of losing myself. That statement speaks to the heart of the psychodynamic work. Not anything that a survey or an assessment for schema investigation would ever, what I call, tease out of a scenario. The fear of fragmentation and the desire to maintain a coherent narrative of the self. My presence, tone, and sequencing. I was trying and helping her remain grounded while exploring this during the session. The objectives was to ground the exploration going back through her narrative, her story, or going back through the beginning of the schema. We will link theory to session moments, and we'll see the practical use of recursion and symbolism in use. And the recursion and the symbolism came from the client. It didn't come from me. And understand how these tools support these clients, especially those with trauma combined with neurodivergent traits. So, after that, what is neo-psychodynamic theory. The neo-psychodynamic theory blends neuroscience and unconscious rational dynamics. The client's dissociation during the rape memory that will be coming up, where she says, "I was out of my body," is understood here not just as trauma, but as a neurobiological response integrated with relational meaning. This allowed us to hold the memory with compassion and reintegrate it through symbolic and body-based awareness. The core assumptions. The core assumptions for this session came to life by the client as the client accessed forgotten memories and remarked, there are so many memories that I just got that were forgotten, and now I have remembered them. This process of remembering within a relational field validates the view that unconscious material can safely be accessed when the client's voice leads. Each assumption listed is rooted in the literature and demonstrated within this one particular session. Relationship matters more than methods. The client responded when their voice shapes the process. And the symbolic emergence during the trance work shows the unconscious expression. The relationship heals more than the technique because there was so much trust involved in coming out with this. And the narrative safety that was used allows emergence. Symbols are the unconscious bridges to lost memory, and this is an example of that. Key influences. Just before we get into reviewing what the client's saying and reviewing the session in itself, the key influences or influencers on my personal practice is indeed Rogers. The concept of emotional presence, unconditional positive regard, and being able to co-regulate. Luke talks about the neuroscience and regulation required. Just another way of making sure that we clear the body, because it is a combination of the thoughts, the memories, the emotions, the feels, particularly the body. And of course, Michael White, the narrative authorship involved. I will share at the end of this that she wrote back a day later saying, "I had the epiphany. I now understand why I always looked at people and people looked at me and I felt so subconscious. And after you hear the session, you will understand this as well." And of course, then there is Stern with his concept and theoretical definition of the relational implicit knowing. The only other place I've heard this spoken of was an old Greek term called know. And it's not N-O-W as in knowledge as we've modernized it today, but it's N-O-E, which has more to do with innate knowledge, the knowledge that we carry with us that was neither nature nor nurture. It is just knowing. Hello. Sorry, I had to take a brief intermission there. So the context of the session, which is coming up next, is the client presented with trauma and referred back to some critical parts. The session started with an EMDR induction. I use that to clear the body. It's very important we clear the body. So we start what I term ground zero, so that a person is Their body is clear, they're free of anxiety, they're feeling good. So any feels that come up during the session from this point forward, we know are fairly related to what we're working on. And it allows us to start in the calmest place possible, just to make the words simple. And the hypnotherapy eventually was used to access and support and gently reintegrate the self states with the story. The full session was 75 minutes long, but I'm giving you a 10-minute snippet, which was the one part that was very rich in healing. So the symbolic metaphor work is represented inside this narrative coming up on the next slide. At one point, the client reflected on a repressed memory specific to sexual trauma and another of paternal emotional neglect. Keep an eye open for those and keep an ear to the speaker. As she shared these memories, she also said, "It's me being scared of forgetting things, forgetting myself as a result." This links directly to how neo-psychodynamic approaches view self-fragmentation and the protective function of dissociation as a signal and part of the processing. The client presented with trauma and inner critical parts. So hypnotherapy was used to access forgotten memories and support and gently reintegrate, just very, very gently. The full session is this is going to start about 2/3 of the way through. So what you will hear is the client is already induced. The client is talking through a hypnotic lens, and this won't become obvious until I bring her out of and land her back to the present state and ask her if she can remember. So you will see the transition coming out of the hypnotic state, but you will not see the transition going into the hypnotic state. So up comes the next slide. Hello. Now we're finally get to listen to the excerpt that I've been talking about and that we will continue to discuss. The hypnotic induction has already been done. I would put this client is currently in a hypnotic state. I would say medium to heavy as opposed light to medium, because the client has her eyes closed. She is slumped. She is bent over and very relaxed, almost in a like you were sitting and sleeping. Hands are quiet. Nothing is moving. And this is the conversation that immersed. Okay. And just click on the sound icon when we finish. So click on the narrative, or the soundtrack should start now.
That's fine, like you don't control that. You just, your intentions, right? Their intentions, they were never bad. It was just being humans.
Okay.
Make me
understand. Make me understand, and let's tie this together with your current discovery of your current issue. How does this fit into your sense of self?
I don't know in terms of how it'll fit into my sense of self. I just feel like it's more of my understanding in terms of my dad didn't support me at that time, not because he didn't want to. He was a human being with his issues, and I was a human being with my issues, and it just didn't gel and it didn't work out. And if one of us was wise, it would have been fine, and it wouldn't have hurt one person or the other. And the same thing with Harold's thing. If I was wiser, things would have been different. If he was wiser, things would have been different. But since none of us was wise, the things were like the way they were. And now with the sense of self, I don't think it was really affected as much as me feeling like I was scared of losing myself. And it feels like it was always fine, and it was it's me being scared of forgetting things. I'm scared of forgetting things, so I'm scared of forgetting my own memories. But I'm feeling like there's so many memories that I just got that were forgotten and not remembered. So I'm not so scared of forgetting myself as a result. Um, does that make any sense?
Yeah, tell me about the memories. Tell me about the memories that you've now remembered.
Like one of the things that I remember, which was the negative thing that was like, I remember where I was raped. I know, like I've known that it was like it was like the kid took me to this construction site with some sand, and he raped me on the sand thing. And I remember somebody saw us, like an adult man saw us, and I feel like he was just watching instead of doing anything. And I think that was the moment where I disassociated and I was out of my body. And ever since then, or maybe before that, I hated people looking at me, like being the center of attention, and felt very out of control. And that's one of the things. And even the memory of like my dad like hurting me, that's something I forgot. Like I don't remember, but it hurt me a lot at that time. I remember thinking about like, oh, I can't depend on him for emotional support. Not all the time, at least, because he goes through some stuff too, and he's not emotionally there for me. And I don't remember it clearly, but that's kind of what I remember from that time. So, and I was, yeah, so that's kind of the main two things, yeah, that came up.
So, as you remember these things now, when you check your body, when you go through your body, how are you feeling?
Well, that's surprising. It feels like there should be pain here, but there isn't. There's the absence of pain there, which is nice.
That was the pain that came up when we tried to clear it earlier. We did not know
Yeah.
what that pain was related to.
No, it's been there since our first EMDR session. I know that much.
Okay. So it's gone
Yeah.
now. You can actually say that it's gone. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe it'll come back. I don't know, but for now it's gone.
Okay. So
Yeah.
let's do a formal comeback. Let's do a
Okay.
formal wrap up, just so that you can come back fully into the present with no hangover, feeling great because you've been able to experience an amazing regression today. This is all work, and this is all you. So just before we leave, just thank your sense of self, because without that sense of self inside you to find those memories and to track the source of those somatic experiences.
Yeah.
And thank you for telling me about the sense of self, because that is the part that helped you integrate the past into today. So in a moment, I will count you from 5 up to 5, and then you will come back to the base of your staircase, the staircase that we created. So in a moment, you'll come back fully into the moment, feeling good. You will feel so happy. You will come back with a cleared body. And when we come back, you'll not only feel good, but things are going to get better and better, hour by hour, day by day, hour. week by week and month by month, it will just get better and better. So feeling good. So coming up with 1, aware of your body. With 2, into the time and place. With 3, 4, moving the fingers and your toes coming back right now, scrunch them, and then open them. And with 5, just feeling good, eyes open. And start to move from the top of your staircase back to 0. Feeling that smooth handrail. On 10, which is your top. On 9, then on 8. Then on 7, remaining relaxed between 6 and 5. Taking a deep breath. You're halfway there. Coming back to your step 0. And we're just moving from 5 to 4, 3, 2, 1, and 0. Just remaining refreshed and alert. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Feeling good? Tell me what you're into now. And just give it a good stretch. And just do a body scan for me and let me know how you're feeling. How did that feel?
That feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like I can see better for some reason.
Oh, like physically see better. Okay.
Yeah,
Alright.
like I could see letters clearer. I don't feel like intensely different or anything like that, but I do feel like calmer and nicer, you know, and my body feels rested. That's pretty
Okay.
much it.
All right. So what you can remember, everything's crystal clear for you.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
But you feel calm. You're calm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did we manage
Yeah.
to tease out what it was that you were trying to express to me earlier about the collapse of your core values and the role it played?
So I don't know if I don't know if I think I guess I can see that. Like I feel like I might have been in general a private kind of person, like child, right? So having that knowledge that someone saw this thing that I consider to be extremely private, you know, because I don't want anyone to know that this happened, right? I think that kind of destabilized my other personality traits to the point where it's like, oh, all I care is that, you know, that people like me and people don't judge me negatively and they don't see me like a bad person, you know? I think that's kind of where it's not like my sense of self was attacked or lost or anything. It was just that it was buried under everything else that I was trying to show to other people, you know?
Yeah. So you can feel more authentic now and just move on. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even the past few sessions, I've been feeling more comfortable at saying, this is what I am. Like, I don't like this thing, you know, like that. So.
Yeah.
Hello. The role of the therapist. In this role, I was not simply guiding the client, I was meeting her nervous system with mine. The therapist's tone, my rhythm, and the emotional presence becomes part of the client's regulatory system. When she said, I don't feel like intensely different or anything, but I do feel calmer, it reminded me that we're not always chasing fireworks. Sometimes healing is a quiet settling. My role was to stay responsive to what her body and her words were offering. When she commented later that she could see letters clearer, that was her describing in a grounded and ordinary way what nervous system relief feels like. It's a sign the session had landed for me. I could see that she had landed. And part of my work was making sure she didn't leave with any emotional hangover, but with that very calmness in her bones. Techniques used in session these techniques were not hypothetical. They were part of what helped the client feel safe enough to remember and reflect. The EMDR bilateral stimulation at the start gave her nervous system something to follow. As she said, it's been there since our first EMDR session. It's gone now. The regression to her child's self happened naturally. As she described, the memory of the boy who raped her and the man who watched and did nothing. That scene was not just remembered, it was felt, and then released through the body scanning and somatic discharge. Pendulation was present in how we moved back and forth between her traumatic memories and her present sense of strength. Though she did not label it in that way, EMDR induction for somatic stabilization was in front of us. Regression to a child state was evident. Heart's dialogue was present, and metaphorical integration, the key window. Metaphorical integration. We'll talk about key window later. Pendulation used, but not visible in transcript. It was all there. And the revivification and hypnotic memories. The client used her own words to name what revivification felt like. It hurt me a lot at that time, she said. I don't remember it clearly, but that's kind of what I remember. Her dissociation gave way to fragments of memory paired with emotion. This illustrates what we call reprocessing, not recollection for its own sake, but emotional reconnection. She didn't just tell the story, she relived it safely with me there in a very safe place. Revivification of the locked room occurred through memory emotion pairing. This brought implicit memory into the relational processing. Okay, sorry. Now we move on to narrative repair through symbolism. The client authored a key and window. In our case, it was literally handed to us, which is why I chose this lovely example. It was self-directed emergence, aligns with the narrative therapy principles and deep psychodynamic themes. The client authored a key and window. Okay. The voice as co-regulating agent. I try to keep my voice very quiet, and I try to keep my conversation quiet as I move through these. The pacing of my voice, the lack of questions. The lovely thing about the hypnotic trance is when you ask a person to speak, they speak. And sometimes they speak for a very long period of time. And you think to yourself, now the true, authentic, and genuine information is coming out, and it can come out regulated. So not only am I making sure that my voice is co-regulated and is staying there to be her gentle pillar is very important because she knows I'm there to help, and she knows that there is no way that I'm going to let her slide out. The place we did the hypnotic transfer from is, I think you heard it in the script, was I asked her to go back to the top of her stairs. The top of that staircase looks out at a vast sky of beautiful flying birds, which is something she relates to and is her place of safety. So these were not just fillers. These were very meaningful structures. When she said at the end, I feel calm, that was earned. That was not induced. And what I mean by that was my job was merely to sound like what safety feels like. So when her system could borrow my tone as a model, she could awake very calm. And this is what I learned through years of practice and very good supervision, that neuro-informed principle in action. When the mind is calm, the body is calm. When the body is calm, the mind is calm. So my voice served as her external prefrontal cortex, that ability to be able to control, slowing the pace and modulating the limbic activation. This aligns with the work on the neuro-informed tone, which is something that I have had to adjust. And one of the protocols I am very mindful of with neurodiverse individuals, because their sensory spheres are so elevated to things like light, sound, noise, conflict, some scenarios. So I walk very, very quietly. And that brings me to something I learned over time, was the neuroscience of safety. It captures what's going on underneath. Do you remember when she said, I'm scared of forgetting things, but I feel like there's so many memories that I just got back? That is my understanding of hippocampal reconsolidation. She was able to revisit the traumatic material and reintegrate it with her current identity, thank you to the effect of co-regulation, that the narrative and our ability to witness it together and bring it back to a body awareness of calmness. When people are full of anxiety, the anxiety creates an environment which is like a magnifying glass on top of the trauma, which is on top of the neurodiverse. So we have many, many layers to penetrate. And I've had most of my successes, not all of them, but a good majority of them, by starting in a very calm, safe environment and exiting and getting that beautiful, what I call 3-point landing, which is to be calm. There will be some post-processing, and that is very well documented in this kind of therapy, that in about 2 to 4 hours, or within 6 hours, and some people up to 2 days, will have a really heightened experience. So you have to keep track. I keep track of my clients immediately after, and I do a lot of between session awareness, because they will feel a little sensitive for a couple of days as they process. They do not stop their reprocessing the minute that we finish therapy. It goes on for them for several hours. And that's called, that's where the hemisphere, the right hemisphere engagement continues through. And that, my understanding is from my studies and my observations, and they seem to mesh extremely well, is the right hemisphere of the brain, the engagement goes through the mirroring process. The amygdala calming via breath and voice pacing, and the hippocampal reconsolidation through the storytelling, which is why I combine so many different types of techniques. So, just a quick note on the integration of parts. When the client described placing her adult hand on the shoulder of her younger self, that was not a suggestion from me. It came from her inner world. This is a symbolic act of attachment repair. She was able to comfort that part of herself that had once been scared and alone. This kind of self-to-self integration is a sign that parts are no longer exiled, but beginning to relate. It's very quiet work. It's deep and transformational for the client. The symbolic gesture of hand on the shoulder was an internal attachment repair. This gesture emerged without prompting, demonstrating the depth potential of symbolic work, is what I represent all of the time. This is where I learned to do what I do, is constantly taking cues from my clients and understanding and just accepting of what they say and what they feel and what they do is real. The notion of recursive coherence in action, this therapy loops through memory, reframing, and repositioning. Another way to say this is that as human beings, we reserve the right to change our minds as new information comes in. So Compass 5, for example, offers ethical grounding of coherence audits. This therapy for reframing is explained just beautifully in that particular ethical grounding process. Diversity and decolonizing practice. One of the beautiful things about using these kinds of modality is I was careful never to impose meaning on the client's imagery or story. They own their own imagery. They own their own story. I would be very remiss to even pretend that I had the entire picture of what their life has looked like. That entire context of everything they've lived since the cutting of the cord at birth to now. Instead, I asked, what does that mean for you? And it reminds us that ethical practice involves the decolonizing of the wanting to use interpretation, letting the client make sense and space for their own language and wisdom, and learn from them. She did not need me to name the locked room. She knew exactly what it held and how it shaped her story. My role was to bear witness, not to overwrite, not to influence. Meaning was not the therapist imposed meaning. It was her meaning. Strengths of this orientation are in it supports complexity. It supports narrative complexity and allows people to write their own stories and tell their own stories. It affirms neurodivergent regulation in the same way that it affirms cultural diversity. And it validates symbolic pathways to integration because of all of the biological happenings that happen in the brain and in the body when trauma occurs. There are limitations. This approach can feel very slippery for new therapists or for those trained to rely on rigid models. There are no scripts, there's no checklists here. We're following emotion and metaphor, and that's not always billable or measurable, but it's often what heals. I don't use it in every session. I use it sparingly, I use it intentionally, and I use it rarely. Not all systems are ready to support this kind of nuanced, flexible care. So I do intertwine this with some very basic techniques. It may feel unstructured to early career therapists who haven't worked with it, and it's not always favored by systems seeking manualized protocols like clinics that you may work for or supervisors that you may be working with. They may not appreciate this. The other thing that I'll mention is that I've been working with hypnotherapy since the early 70s, and one of the things that I'm very, very good at are inductions. And the part that I'm learning and the part that I will always be learning is that content in the middle, which is the therapeutic relationship during that session, and to remain as that invisible therapist. So I leave a very, very few footprints in there when I'm there. My personal alignment, it reflects how I see clients. I see them as whole beings with their inner truth. They all come. And the inner truth is buried in there somewhere. My job is just to guide them to there so that they can choose the path they need to choose. And during hypnotherapy, if they're not ready, we move on. We never force anybody to open a subconscious or an unconscious door unless they're absolutely ready. They have to be as curious as I am. And the containment to our shared space. This theory reflects how I see clients, most definitely. So to summarize the clinical case summary, it reflects the symbolic internal shift, not external behavioral exchange. It did not need, the client did not need me to explain what healing was. She showed me what healing was for her. When she said, "It feels good, I feel calmer, my body feels rested," I knew the work had landed somewhere good. The goal was not catharsis, it was coherence. The integration of traumatic memory in combination with emotional safety and body awareness created a quiet and profound shift, one that I trust will continue to deepen outside of our sessions, because she will continue to reflect on that and carry that with her forever and a day. So resources for further study are these 6 in particular, which are just in front of my goodbye, which is a list of references at the end. And I enjoyed doing this, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. Thank you. You enjoyed it as well. Thank you.